Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today we're going to be looking at the champions that were released as part of patch 5.10. That included the current fusion that is going on, Opardin, ClanFather. We're going to look at their multipliers, have a look at whether or not they are any good in terms of dealing damage, and I'll probably cover a little bit in terms of where I think they're best played. So let's get started. So the first champion we're going to look at is Arndulf. Now Arndulf is an epic and is based on defense-based damage. So he's got a pretty strong defense at 1332 for a epic champion, and he's pretty fast at 101. His AoEs are strong. They're going to be on par with something like Iron Brago's A3 ability. So it's good, strong, solid, but it's not going to be like top tier. It's not going to breach the sort of attack-based nukers. It's not going to be on a Soulless level or a Tutora Rhymeheide level. I think in terms of his place in the game, the best place is going to be as almost like a budget Black Knight champion in the Kuldath boss battle for Doom Tower. I think his kit is pretty well aligned for that role. So next up is Kunoichi. Now this is another defense-based nuker, identical base defense as Arndulf with speed of 99. Slightly less multipliers. It's still a very strong nuke on the A2. And the A1 is an alright nuke. Now, this champion is probably going to be very good for you if you have been unlucky with pulling Shadowkin champions, because it is effectively a budget Kuoku, in the sense that it's got ally protection. She has a passive that gives herself block damage if she takes too much damage. So for the last boss in Faction Wars 21, which is going to be the Ignore Defense Faction War boss, this might be quite clutch in trying to keep your team alive if you haven't got your Jintoros, your Lady Kimmies, your Gamarins of the world. And there's not that many revive champions in the faction, and I think none of them will actually work for that boss because you actually have to have killed someone to get a revive going on. Great epic, pretty solid for that role, and also probably good in clan boss as well as a budget ally protector. Next up we've got Lady Quilen, which is the third epic of the lot. Now this is a bit of a weird champion for me. Her base attack is very good at 1476. It's quite high for an epic, and she's pretty decent speed at 101. Her abilities, when we've graded them, make her sound very strong, in the sense that her A2 is godlike, and that's pretty high up. You know, you're looking on par with like a Constantine single target nuke on the A1 as a comparison. And her A1 is strong as well. The problem is, because she is a bit of a support champion in terms of the buff she provides, they've effectively neutered her damage a little bit, otherwise she would be extremely powerful. Which means that you end up getting good abilities on her A3, but not necessarily the damage, even though a lot of her abilities are required either through critical hit or killing the enemy. So what you have is a situation where you've got a champion that is designed to do damage, that doesn't do enough damage to impact necessarily her other abilities, but because her other abilities are really strong, she kind of doesn't do enough damage. So I don't really know with her. She's probably the weakest of the epics, but she is a very good support. Like, the role she does in terms of the buffs and the turn meter is very strong. So old Ghrukkus is basically your progression based Fire Knight champion. He's got a triple hit A1, has a bit of an AoE in there, decent damage. It's got heal reduction, decreased attack. He's going to be really good if you need that kind of champion and you're progressing through a Fire Knight. Damage on this champion is not there. His base attack is too low at 1079. His multipliers, when you read them, are pretty high, but actually when you work out how much it works in terms of the way that we grade it, you end up with an average damage dealer. So if you need that kind of champion, very good. He's got decent debuffs in this kit, but most players, I would imagine, in the late game and the end game will probably never use this guy. Danag Skullreap is probably the best arena-based nuker of these champions. He's got a pretty strong base attack, but it's not extreme. You know, it's not on the Bistofus levels, it's not on probably the Trunda levels, but it's a good base attack. 1487, decent base speed at 97. It's a little bit slow, but it's not the end of the world. Now his kit on his A2 is where the AoE nuke is. 4.2 is very good for an AoE nuke. Typically, we look for anything around 4 and above for a good arena nuker. This puts him on par with a Fushan A2. So it's not your top tier. You know, Herndig is a little bit higher than him. Trunda is much higher than him. Ethos is much higher than him. But he does have a good enough A2 that you will be able to work with it in Goal 4 if you haven't got a better arena nuker. His A3 is also godlike as a single target hit, and obviously he's got that weird cooldown mechanics. So I think if you're looking for a goal for Nuka to fit into either your secondary team in maybe 3v3, he's a pretty good option, especially if you don't have the Trunders, the Candrafons, the hard-hitting AoE Nukas. You didn't get Herndig with the fusion. He's a good pull. He's not the end of the world. I think he is a decent damage dealer. Now we're going to touch on Jingwon, who arguably is the worst legendary in the entire game by a mile. Doesn't really have a place in the game. Probably should just be deleted and remade. Looks pretty cool. That's about as useful as he is. He's not even as useful as Noble. At least with Noble, you can make a +1 on Ninja. You can't even empower with this guy. He's useless. He's utter useless. He's a HP-based champion, and we know as a trend, unless the HP-based champion has some form of extra hit conditional mechanic like Vasulf, like Magna, they tend to be quite low damage dealers. I think even Sir Nicholas is good damage, but it's not, you're never going to really use him as an arena nuker. You're never really going to use him to nuke waves. He just doesn't do enough damage. So with Jingwon, we've got a 0.23 A1, 0.35 A2, and then a 0.14 times 2 on the A3, which is obviously an AoE double hit. For reference, I think Vasulf and Magna are around about 0.22 per hit. And I think Vasulf is like 0.25 per hit. So effectively, they're almost double this damage, which is why they hit so hard. So you will never use him as a damage dealer. His abilities in terms of debuffs don't have any place in the progression stage. So if you pull him as a progression champion, he is no use to you. And even in the end game stage, decreased accuracy is niche usage, but normally the champion needs to have something else. We're talking Whirlim can freeze the Bommel bombs at the same time as doing decreased accuracy. Anax has decreased accuracy, but he also has poisons and damage and debuffs like decreased defense and weaken. So the problem you've got here is he just brings the one debuff, which might be useful in some areas, but not enough considering the rest of his kit is really weak. We're talking his A2. It will extend a random 2 debuffs when you've got Dark Kael and Thalesia, who are probably relatively recent for some players, that does it to everyone, all debuffs on 1 turn. And they're epics. So I really just don't understand this champion. If you pull him, commiserations, vault him and forget him and hope he gets reworked. Okay, so the one champion of this bunch that I'm most interested in is this guy, Holsring. Now, a lot of players will look at him and go, he's a random attack champion, no reliability, not enough damage, useless. Which is, to some extent, correct. However, the fun thing with random attack is if you can set up the right conditions, they end up being extremely broken strong in some scenarios. So for example, Fushan's A3 in a clan boss scenario is significantly more powerful than say Faction Wars in terms of damage output. And Pixnil is a bit of a running joke that I always have, where her multi-hitter is a 5-hitter. Now if you put that against clan boss, it becomes one of the strongest abilities in clan boss. However, normally it's just pointless. So Holsring, I think, is one of those champions that I am interested to see if I get him to mess around with different teams. I think he's very strong as a Krutraxa replacement in Fire Knight, considering he's got that turn meter reduction on his A3. And also when we look at his damage numbers here, 1509 base attack is good, is very high. Speed 105 is also very high for that kind of damage dealer, so you can build him quite fast. He's got a 2, 3, and a 4 hit, so Giant Slayer is 100% your choice here. And the multipliers are high enough that it basically converts him to a godlike damage dealer on a single target environment. Clan boss, Fire Knight, bosses, probably Faction Wars if you get to the boss and you've only got one target. He's also got a substantial amount of turn meter drop in that multi-hit, so he can probably, like Dark Fae would be another example. If you can bring him to kill the allies and he can keep sustaining that A3, that's probably a lot of turn meter. It's not going to be as good as Allure. No one is good as Allure, but it's going to be on par with other turn meter drop champions out there. So I'm really interested to see. There are some rumors floating about that this might be the next login reward champion, which if that is the case, I'm not disappointed, because I do think he could be quite fun. And finally, we're going to talk about Opardin ClanFather. So obviously his role is not damage, but this video is about checking damage multipliers, so we're going to look at that. Obviously, he's a very strong healer. That is his role. Cleanse, we've seen some people try to use it in Clan Boss already, where Deadwood putting a video out, painfully trying to speed tune because of his A1. However, he has got a great base HP, which means that he's easy to keep alive. you could probably scale him up to around about 90k HP with a good late game build. 102 speed is good. His A1 is a double hit, 0.14. Ironically, his A1 is the same multiplier as Jingwon's A3, just as a joke, you know, considering one's a Void Legendary, one's a free fusion. By free, I mean a Fragment Collector. So you would expect Jingwon to be hitting harder than an Opardin A1, who's designed to be a healer. His A2 AoE is a 0.27. They're both average and weak. They're not going to do any damage. But anyway, guys, that's the end of the video. It's a quick and short one for me for once. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these champions. Are there any that you're particularly excited about? I know a lot of people were disappointed when they first came out. I actually think that the epic pool is pretty good for in terms of having predefined the exact roles of where you're going to use them. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you in the next video.